Hello, everyone. Mr. Lennon here to sort of lead you through a little democracy in action look at what a ancient Greek trial would have been like if you actually were living several thousand years ago. Now, the ancient Greeks were the first ones that came up with the idea of democracy, the first ones that actually used jury trials, which is an important element of democratic participation. But the Greeks did have quite a few differences from our modern trials that I think you should understand going into our little simulation today. First of all, the Greeks like to keep things short and to the point. So their trials lasted no more than one day. They actually would have specific time limits for speakers, and so they wanted to keep things moving. Second, Greek trials did not use any lawyers or any judges. That seems odd to us, but for the Greeks, they thought public speaking was very important, and therefore you had to represent yourself if you ever found yourself caught up in a legal entanglement. So you had to be a good public speaker. Thirdly, the Greeks, for their juries, operated a little differently. Greek juries were always a large number and always an odd number. So for instance, they would have 101 jurors, 501 jurors, sometimes even 1,001 jurors. Why such a weird number? Because they voted by majority vote. When everyone voted, they counted up guilty or innocent and went with whatever had the most. And by having an odd number, that meant you never had a tie. Our system works a little differently than that. Another huge issue with Greek trials is that women were not given the same rights in ancient Greece that we see today. Women were excluded from participation in any element of the trial. They were not allowed to serve on the jury. They were not allowed to even speak in front of a jury, even if they were directly involved. So this meant that a male relative had to speak for them, had to represent them in person. And this is because, women were not given the same equality status that men were throughout all levels of society. So our trial today is actually going to connect to this piece because women in ancient Greece were not allowed to have jobs. They were not allowed to move about society at their will. Anytime they left their own house, they had to have a male relative accompany them, whether it was a brother, an uncle, a father, a cousin, whoever it was. And so it's a very, very different way of lifestyle than we are used to. But keep that in mind, that that's part of our case. Women are not allowed to work. And therefore, if you are a family with a lot of daughters, they become very expensive because as they get older, you still have to provide for them, and they're never able to go out and help bring in money for the family income. The last thing I wanted you to also kind of be aware of is because of this lack of equality amongst women, if a ancient Greek family had a lot of daughters, you could legally abandon your child at the city gates within, I believe it was 3 days of their birth. So a child is born. If a family decides they don't want that child, they can leave the baby at the city gates. And any Greek coming in or out of the city seeing this child could immediately adopt it and take it. Now, you didn't know how they were going to raise that child. A Greek family could raise it as their own child and give it all the benefits of family life, or they could take the child and turn it into essentially a slave, a servant that would not have all the same rights of the family. So no one knew what would happen when a child was abandoned. But that was considered legal. And again, a husband, the male figure of the family, decided these kinds of things. Lastly, and this is for the girls, depending on how much you trust your dad, girls were not allowed to pick their own husbands. A father always decided who his daughters would marry. And so often a father looks for very different things in a spouse for his daughter than a girl might look for. So that's one of those weird things that we have to kind of consider today. Again, if two people get married and they are having problems getting along with each other, it's the man that can decide whether or not they get divorced. And if a divorce happens, then the daughter, the woman, has to go back and live with one of her male relatives, either her father's house or a brother's house or an uncle's house. These are some of the issues at stake in this trial that we're going to be talking about. Okay, so I just wanted to give you some background on these pieces. It'll help you understand what's coming, because you are going to be asked to be a jury, and we're going to assume all of you are able to vote. So girls, you get to participate here. And the other ninth grade teachers, some of whom are men and some are women, are also going to play roles. Okay, so we're not going to follow the Greeks, blow by blow here. But they're going to be bringing a case, a mock trial, so to speak, in front of you. And so you're going to get to listen and try to decide guilt or innocence. Okay.
All right. Welcome to our Athenian courtroom. My name is Mrs. Gates, and I will be your judge for our court case today. Jurors, you have been selected to serve in today's trial. I ask that you listen carefully to the proceedings. Each of you, as a citizen of Athens, must perform your duty to uphold the law and to promote a better future for our city-state. You have been each given 2 tokens, and with these tokens, you may cast only 1 vote, either guilty or innocent. I will be playing the role of timekeeper today as well, and our witnesses, as they begin their proceedings, they will be timed and not to go over 3 minutes. As we begin today's proceedings, I must warn you that I must have silence during this trial, and any offender will be harshly removed. The case before you today has been brought by Zephyr, the father of Aaron, divorced wife of Arcades. Zephyr claims that Arcades has broken the law by returning Aaron to her family without returning a substantial dowry paid at the wedding. He asked the court to find Arcades guilty and to force the return of said money in full payment. I call on Zephyr at this time to present his case, and his time will start now.
Hi everybody. I'm Zephyr, father of Aaron. One day I went to Arcades and I asked him to be my daughter's husband. I thought that Arcades would be a good provider towards their relationship, so I supported them with a hefty dowry. This dowry was supposed to be used to increase the family business and to make the family prosperous. Aaron got pregnant. Arcades wanted a boy to help with the family business. It was a girl. Aaron was happy, and the baby brought joy to her life. Once again, Aaron got pregnant. It was another girl, and Arcades started to gain great concern for his family. His business had not been going well, and how he would pay dowries for his daughters to marry. 3 years later, my daughter Aaron had another daughter. Arcades made Aaron abandon the baby outside the city walls. He divorced my daughter. Aaron wants her daughters, but for Aaron to find a new husband to provide for her daughters, I would need the dowry back from Arcades. If he and his business fails, it's not Aaron's fault. And it is because Arcades is a bad businessman. And if Aaron didn't have a boy, it wasn't her fault either. I trusted him, and he failed. The money was to be used for his family, and where is that money now? Aaron gave birth to her 3rd daughter, and where is that baby now? I should get my wealth back to its rightful owner, me. Thank you.
Thank you, Zephyr. I will now call on Arcades to speak on his own behalf.
I am Arcades. All my life, all I wanted was to be happy. And that is all I want to be at this time. I wanted to have a great, warm family and live a life to the fullest. But things, they haven't turned out that way. Yes, My ex-wife and I were married for a long time. We had a good relationship at first, but then after our second child, she started to act differently. It was upsetting to me, and she would act like this, especially after we had our second child. We did have a third daughter, but unfortunately things didn't work out for the child. It was a girl, and I couldn't support her with the rest of the family. If we kept her, we would endure the full impact of the pain she would bring. That pain would be hunger, malnutrition, poverty, homelessness, and more. I couldn't let the family break down this way. That is why she needed to be given up. It was for the greater good. After that, my ex-wife started acting strangely, unhappily, and sometimes scarily even. Not that she was scared, but I was. I wanted to be happy, not sad. I felt upset every time I looked at her and thought about her. I didn't want her depressing and ruining the family, and that is why I filed for divorce. Being the man and father of the family calls for responsibility and is at sometimes full of burden. It's not easy taking care of the family as well as my business, yet I've had to deal with both. I take care of both of my daughters now, whom I love so much, but taking care of children does cost money. Supporting them is and will be tough, especially since they are female, because eventually I must offer a dowry to the man's family of whom I want my daughter to marry. And we know that a dowry is a payment given to the family of the young man that my daughter would marry. To be able to do that and have my daughters live a happy, prosperous life calls for money. I made the decision of using the original dowry wisely, a dowry that was given to me from my ex-wife. And by using it wisely for us and our family, I think it will be important. And all I want is a happy family living well. I put the dowry into my business to contribute to our living and happiness. But things at work aren't going so well, and the dowry is what is keeping it running. Taking away the dowry would not only ruin my business, but my daughter's future. They are living with me now, not with her. My ex-wife knows that. And how can she expect to take the dowry away, knowing that our daughters' lives will suffer from it? No, that is just wrong and selfish. My daughters are living with me, and that is how it's going to be. I won't let her ruin their lives and break the family. So please, make the right decision and vote against me returning the dowry. Because if you vote in her favor, my ex-wife, our family will suffer and be ruined. I don't want my daughters and me to have to live outside, homeless, begging for money and food. I know you will make the right decision and do what is best for the family. Vote against me returning the dowry.
Thank you, Hades. You may step down. I'm now calling upon Parthon, the son of Zephyr and the brother of Aaron, who wishes to speak on behalf of his sister and father.
I am Parthon, Aaron's brother, and I am here today to speak to you about Aaron's life. Aaron has been a devoted wife and mother to her husband for many years. She gave him 3 wonderful children and kept a neat and orderly household for Arcades to come home to each day. Arcades was happy with the marriage at first and eagerly agreed to marry Aaron. He was all too happy to accept the large dowry given by our family on their wedding day. Unfortunately, the money was not used wisely and it disappeared quickly. I would like to point out that Arcades claims that my sister Aaron is cursed. It is this curse that he uses for an excuse to divorce Aaron and send her back to live with us, while he keeps their 2 daughters and looks for a new wife. In reality, it is Arcades who is cursed. It is Arcades who has failed in business. As his job situation became worse, Arcades neglected his duties as a father and husband to my sister Aaron. He even abandoned their 3rd child, a daughter, in front of the city gates, claiming that he could not afford another girl in the family. The only reason that he is divorcing Aaron, while at the same time keeping the first 2 children, is that he needs an excuse to avoid paying back the dowry, which is the usual law. Erin loves her children and needs the dowry to find another husband. We simply ask that you make Arcades follow the law and return the dowry in full. Please help my sister.
Thank you. I will now call on our final speaker of the day, Davian. Davian wishes to speak on behalf of his friend, Arcades.
I have known and respected Arcades all of my life. Never once have I, nor any other Greek, known him to take what he didn't deserve. The same is true for the dowry. Once upon a time, he had an excellent business. Everything was going great until he met the devil. She called herself Erin. Erin's father knew his daughter was cursed and wanted nothing to do with her. So he paid him a somewhat generous dowry to take her off his hands. Little did my poor friend know he was being tricked. At the time, he thought she seemed harmless, so they soon got married. She had a wonderful daughter. Arcades was pleased, but he knew how hard and expensive it was to raise a girl. Still, he loved her nonetheless. But then he was blessed with another daughter. Many Athenians would have abandoned her, but not Arcades. He knew it would be in his wife's best interest to keep the girl, who turned out to be wonderful as well. But then, a little later, another girl was born, and it was at this point that Arcades knew that his wife was cursed. He had no choice but to leave this girl outside of the city gates to let a wealthier family adopt her. It is a common practice, and if he had kept her, there wouldn't have been enough money to support his entire family. Plus, his wife did not argue his decision until days later. After a few days, Erin would not talk to Arcades. All she would do is cry in the corner, only thinking about herself. She stopped cooking and helping her daughters and husband in any way that a wife and mother is supposed to. With the marriage failing because of Erin, Arcades was still trying to support her, but he finally came to the decision that he had no choice but to divorce her. He would normally not complain about returning the dowry, which, by the way, was given to him by Erin's father, but it was Erin's fault that the marriage failed, not his, so he should not have to give the money back for reasons that he could not control. It would be selfish for Erin to take the money back when Arcades has to take care of his daughters. Plus, she and her family knew that it would come to this because she is the devil.
Thank you, Davian. Members of the jury, you have heard the evidence given by both sides of this case. Think carefully about the evidence and the consequences of your vote. Remember, we are only deliberating whether or not Arcades should return the dowry. No other action should be considered. If you vote guilty, you are stating that Arcades should return the money. If you vote innocent, you are stating that Arcades does not need to return the money. At this time, we will pause and allow your teachers to vote. So again, if you are voting guilty, you're stating that Arcades should return the money. And if you are voting innocent, you are stating that Arcades does not need to return the money. At this time, we will continue with the behind-the-scenes story.
I'm Ms. Robinson, and I would like to now tell you the true story of Arcades and Erin. Arcades was 33 years old when he finally took a wife. The marriage was arranged with a family that he had known for many years. Zephyr, the head of the girl's family, approached him and proposed that his youngest daughter, Erin, would make him a good and capable wife for Arcades. Arcades had known Erin since she was a small child, but it had been many years since their paths had crossed. His sisters told him that Erin had grown into a beautiful woman at 15 and that her family had become wealthy. The wedding arrangements were made without Arcades and Erin seeing each other or speaking. The ceremony took place, and as was customary, a dowry was paid. The amount was considerable since her family had recently prospered. Arcades was extremely pleased at his good fortune. He now had a beautiful and pleasant wife, as well as the money to expand his business. Sometime later, Erin became pregnant and gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Arcades was disappointed at not having a son to help with the family business, but the baby was beautiful and brought much joy to him and Aaron. Besides, there was still plenty of time for Aaron to have a boy, and soon his disappointment was forgotten. Aaron proved to be a good mother and an excellent wife. She managed the home well, was assertive, yet courteous with the slaves, and was always good company to come home to after a hard day's work. Erin again became pregnant. Arcades looked forward to the birth of a son, but once again the baby was a girl. This time, Arcades could not hide his disappointment. He worried about the future and the cost of providing dowries for his daughters to marry. How could he manage this without a son to help him with the work? He knew that it was common practice to abandon an unwanted child outside of the city gates. People unable to have children of their own might adopt the child and raise her as their own. Arcades gave serious consideration to this plan. The day after the birth, he visited Erin and the new baby. As soon as Erin saw her husband, she knew what he intended to do. Arcades took one look at his wife and thought of how loyal and devoted she had been these past years. He saw the despair in her eyes at the thought of losing her baby, and he could not bring himself to abandon the child. He felt that he was being foolish for making this decision, since most Athenians would not have considered keeping a second girl unless they were very wealthy. Erin was delighted to keep the baby. On the 5th day, religious rites were performed, and on the 10th day, the baby was named. Erin could rest at ease, for now the baby was an official part of the family and could not be rejected. 3 years later, Erin became pregnant again. This was a time for great concern. Arcades' business had not been going well. If Erin did not have a boy this time, there was little doubt as to what would happen. Throughout the pregnancy, the marriage began to change. Arcades became more obsessed with the business and worried about the family's future. He came home less frequently, and Erin became worried and unhappy. When the third girl was born, Arcades did not even visit his wife. Instead, he sent a message to her demanding that the baby be packed up and left outside the city gates. Erin had no choice but to obey her husband. She prayed and made offerings in hope that the gods would find suitable parents for her baby and let her live. Erin knew she would never learn the fate of her child, and alone in her bedroom chamber she wept. From that time on, the marriage was never the same. Erin and Arcades lost the close relationship they once had. Now they rarely had contact with each other, and Erin feared what would happen. Arcades soon decided to divorce her. He felt that she had been cursed by the gods and would only bring him more misfortune. Why else would the business be failing and his wife only bear girls? He felt that he must find himself another wife who could change his fate and bear him sons, or his family would perish. Divorces happened quickly in Athens, so soon the arrangements were made. Erin's older brother Parthon was asked to come to the house and witness the divorce. Arcades also asked his good friend Davian to be a witness. When everyone was assembled, Arcades explained his predicament and read a statement of formal divorce. Erin was then asked to leave the house with her brother and rejoin her birth family. As was customary, their 2 daughters remained with Arcades. Arcades then took steps to find a new wife to help raise his daughters and, with luck, give birth to a son. All of this was carried out in a correct way according to the law, but Arcades did not return the dowry to Erin's family after the divorce. He told himself that he didn't have the money because his business wasn't doing well, and taking out such a large sum would surely ruin him. If his business failed, how would he eventually pay the dowries for his and Erin's daughters? Arcades loved his daughters and felt that since it was Erin who was cursed to bear girls, it was her family's obligation to let him keep the money and provide for their futures. Therefore, instead of visiting Erin's family to negotiate some type of repayment, he ignored them, hoping that with his new wife, all would come right in the end. Erin's family felt hurt and wronged. They did not realize that Arcades had been having such difficulty with his business. Erin was distraught at losing her family and blamed herself. Zephyr and Parthon talked the matter over and decided to bring Arcades to trial. They knew that there was nothing that they could do about the divorce, since it was legal. They also knew that they could not get Erin's children back unless Arcades allowed it. But they could force him to return the dowry, because Athenian law required the dowry to be returned along with the wife. And so it was that Arcades was brought to trial by Erin's family, accused illegally of keeping Erin's dowry and asking the jury to demand its repayment.
Thank you for joining us today during our Athenian courtroom. We hope you enjoyed this simulation, and your teacher will take over from here.